Welcome to DEF CON 3. I'm KT McFarland. The United Nations is making a new push for peace in Syria. The UN Syria envoy is inviting leaders of that country's moderate opposition to Geneva to work out a potential peace plan with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Critics are already saying this is a non-starter because terrorist groups like al-Qaeda and ISIS hold significant territory in the country. Well, here with their take are Stephen Bucci, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense during the George W. Bush administration, and James Robbins, a senior fellow with the American Foreign Policy Council. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Steve, let me go to you. We're talking to the moderate Syrian opposition, maybe talking to the Assad government, but isn't there another actor in this whole conflict?
Well, there's a whole bunch of other actors, KT. The so-called radical part of the resistance is actually the biggest, the most powerful, the most effective force on the battlefield, and that's al-Nusra, ISIS. All these guys are there. The Civil War round 2 is really what's going to decide the future of Syria. These talks are nice, but I don't think they're going to be terribly effective.
James, what do you think? Is this just a hopeless, nice idea, but it's never going to get any traction, James?
I think so. The UN has even downgraded expectations. They say they're not negotiations, they're more like consultations. They said it won't result in an agreement, it's more like just an exchange of views. So you really have to wonder why they're doing this. They're also inviting in the Turks and the Iranians to these talks. So there are a lot of outside actors, but not the people who are winning on the ground.
All right, so then let me just turn to you, Steve. Is it just everybody like a nice free trip to Geneva? Nobody has any anticipation of success? What do you think?
Well, I'll give them a little more than that. This is what the UN does. It tries to broker peace. But in this case, I think it's an unrealistic expectation given the actors. Assad only controls a small part of the country now. They're leaving major players out, but they're people that are not terribly amenable to talking with anybody. They just want to win out of the barrel of a weapon, and that's the model they're using, and you know what? It's working pretty well for them so far.
James, we looked at everything in the Middle East seems to be a proxy fight about something else. So if you look at Syria and the conflict in Syria, the Syrian civil war, is it a proxy fight for other bigger groups, and if so, which ones?
Well, it's kind of turned into that. Certainly the Assad regime has been a client of the Iranians for some time. The Turks are supporting the people they want to support. There are various actors backing al-Nusra, which is the al-Qaeda affiliate. The Islamic State seems to be pretty much on its own, doing its own thing. I think the only state without a strong proxy right now is the United States and the Western powers. The moderates that we've supported haven't done very well. So if it is a proxy fight, we need to up our game.
Let me go back to you, Steve. A couple of weeks ago, President Sisi of Egypt and the Saudis were talking about the establishment of a joint Arab force. Presumably, it's going to be a moderate group. It's going to be people we like that would get in the fight in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. What's happened to that?
Well, it's actually progressed quite a bit in Yemen. We're not seeing so much in Iraq, and we haven't really seen anything yet in Syria. I'm not sure they want to jump into that abyss. It's good that they're cooperating. These are countries that we are supporting and should be supporting, but Syria is still a pretty devilish problem.
James, the president is negotiating with Iran over the nuclear program. We're all aware of that. And the administration keeps saying, look, there's no connection between our negotiations over Iran's nuclear weapons program and lifting sanctions, and on the other hand, the other things Iran is doing in the neighborhood. Is Iran the sort of secret power in the entire region? Are we afraid to go after Iran over Syria because we're worried about what Iran might do over the nuclear talks? Or talk to me about the Iran-Assad connection.
Well, yes, there is a connection between these things. On the administration side, the connection is they don't want to get the Iranians upset or they might walk out of the talks, and this great legacy moment for President Obama will go down the drain. And on the regional side, there's a connection because other countries see the Iranians with their influence over the United States, their influence in the region, and the message to them is, hey, you better deal with the Iranians because they are the growing force. So whether the White House wants to admit it or not, there are connections that they just won't acknowledge.
Steve, what do you say?
Oh, Jim's absolutely right. There are so clearly connections. You can't dissociate these things. But the Obama administration is so intent on getting a deal. Number one, it's a lousy deal. Number two, they're ignoring capturing ships, bad influence in Syria. It's to not act and consider these things is the height of foolishness and the height of putting one goal above all others, and that's just bad diplomacy.
Let me turn to final word to you, Jim. Where are we in 6 months with Syria?
I think in 6 months we're about where we are right now. The battle goes back and forth. The civil war shows no sign of abating. These talks aren't going to amount to anything, and I think we'll just keep seeing the same old thing.
What do you think, Steve?
Jim's dead on again. I don't see a big change coming. There could be some shifting. This is like World War I. We're going back and forth over 100 yards of terrain, little bitty towns. Not a lot of progress in the next 6 months.
Well, thank you both for joining us, Stephen Bucci and James Robbins. Check out foxnews.com for more on this developing story and others. I'm KT McFarland, and thanks for watching.